Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the New Media Show. My name is Todd Cochran. I want to welcome you to the show. Very early morning here in Honolulu. The sun's not even up, but that's the way we roll on the New Media Show. Good morning, Rob. You were saying just before we started here that the sun is actually out in Seattle. Is that like, is it Divine Province or something?
Yeah, I think it's a sign of spring. So it's a good sign. Being in Los Angeles for the last I guess 6 days or so, it's been sunny and warm down there every day. So I'm kind of accustomed to it now. So when I come up here, I kind of expect it now.
Well, I've always told my wife, we've talked several times about moving back to the lower 48, and we were actually having that discussion the other day, and I told her, I said, I don't know how you transplant a pineapple to a different place in the, in the country, but we're actually talking about it a little bit, which is a first. We both kind of disagreed, but now we've actually considering it, which is shocking, but enough with that. But good morning, Rick. We got Rick Calvert on with the New Media Expo. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Todd. Good morning, Rob. I'm
Good
doing
morning,
great.
Rick.
I was just sharing with Rob. I get in here about 5 a.m. I start the studio up, and of course, my studio is attached to my house. It's a bedroom in my house, and I was not quite dressed appropriately when Rick rang in this morning. So
The joys of live internet TV.
yeah, luckily we weren't live and just made all kinds of people throw up in their mouths, I guess.
You guys have no idea what you missed.
Todd and his
worth
birthday
it
suit.
every
There you
minute.
go.
I had my pants on. That was a good thing.
Yeah,
Because that would
you
have
were
that.
respectable, Todd.
Yeah, it was respectable. Hey, it was Hawaii wear. That's how we roll here,
Hawaii wear. There you
Mahalo.
go.
So anyway, Rob, so you're down in L.A. this past week. How's things going down there? You getting a toehold in finally, or has it been another week?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm definitely getting the lay of the land by now, and yeah, I was down there the whole week this past week. So I think like I mentioned on the show, I was driving my car down. So
Yeah.
I spent the whole week down there, Monday through Friday, and just flew back last night. So
Did you find a place to sublet yet, or?
no, I haven't yet. So I'm still Airbnb-ing it every week down there. So
I tell you, you'll become the Airbnb expert. You'll be able to write the book on Airbnb before it's all
yeah,
over. won't you?
exactly. Every week down there,
We love
Podcast one
Airbnb.
is.
They're a T-Bex sponsor.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that they actually are considering getting a huge round of funding or something like that based on a $10 billion valuation right now. So anyway, that's not a new media topic, but it just tells you how big that company is getting.
Yeah, they say they want to own everything travel from start to finish, which is kind of a moment.
They want to be a hospitality company. They want to compete with Expedia.
Yeah.
There was a
Well, I
great
think they
article
are.
about them in Fast Company. I don't know if you guys saw that, but yeah, pretty interesting.
Well, they're definitely a disruptor, so we'll have to keep watch on them. But anyway, I know, Rick, that on the last episode, you watched our last episode with Cliff on, and you had some concerns. I definitely want to spend some time talking about your concerns this morning. And
Well,
so I guess for those of you that aren't familiar, Rick runs the New Media Expo, and it's an annual trade conference for podcasters, bloggers, and live streaming folks that cover the base of everyone that comes to the show.
blogging, podcasting, web TV, and I guess social media marketing falls into all that too.
Yeah,
Sure.
there you go. So
Because all those guys want to interact with all of us guys
that's right.
and
Okay.
girls.
So last week we had Rick on. I mean, not Rick on, but Cliff on, and I know Cliff is no longer with you guys. He's moving on to different things and changing phases of business. But I know you had some concerns. So let's go ahead and get right into the knit and grit, I guess.
Well, it was really. I get you. I know you can relate to this, Todd, by running the podcast awards for so many years.
You never can
When
do anything perfect.
Yeah, and you get a little sensitive about things, and when I was watching it at first, I was upset, and then I calmed down after a little while. And I thought, hey, whatever. Obviously, everybody has right to their own opinions, but I know Cliff had said something about a keynote we did a couple years ago being like a fraternity, and the lady who was in that keynote that he was referring to is a professional video producer. I mean, that's her job. And I don't think she'd like to be characterized as being unprofessional. And Rob said something about, not bringing the all of the niches to the show.
Oh,
And Cliff seemed to be focusing, saying, we should just bring professional people to the show. It was just contradictory. The things, and Rob also said something about podcasting being a bolt-on to New Media Expo. And those are the things that we just don't look at it that way at all. Our goal is to bring all of the entire industry and all of podcasting, but all of new media to the show. And you guys talked about podcast movement a little bit, which Todd, you and I have talked about them offline.
Yeah.
And I talked to Jared Easley last night as well. Jared has helped us with our track the last couple of years. We're supportive of any event in the industry, and we because our goal as a company, as a business, when this first started, I was just a political blogger, and I wanted to go meet other political bloggers. That was the initial kind of aha moment. But I'm an event doing the research to kind of see where this event is. And that's another thing you guys were talking about, maybe we need more vertical events, like Blog Her type things, and the comedy podcasting festival up in LA, which looks like a great event, by the way. I started in that place, back in 2006, and realized that's not an industry event. And we do a vertical event with T-Bex. I think there is a space for vertical events in the new media space, but it's not good for podcasting, in my opinion, to have a podcasting only conference to say that's the place where podcasters should go, or to say comedy podcasters should go to a comedy event, professional podcasters should go to a professional event, sports podcasters should go to a sports podcasting event. When you do that, if it's a conference that's based on learning, that can make sense, and I can see why you want to focus. And there are verticals that support that, again, like T-Bex. But if you're talking about an industry event that represents everybody, where you want to advance the goals of the entire industry, then you need an all-inclusive event. And that's what we've been built to be from day one. And that is what NAB, which we're doing this lounge with them right now. I've said from the very beginning, NMX is the NAB of the future, or back then Blog World and New Media Expo is the NAB of the future. And I think when you're thinking for the long time future of podcasting and all new media, our industry needs an event like that. And for now, it's New Media Expo. Somebody else could come along and do it instead of us. Maybe we do it wrong. That's fine. But I don't see anybody doing anything close to what we do. And I think it's important. I think we serve a really important purpose in the industry. So that was it pretty much.
I think Rick, on your, these vertical events, they serve a niche purpose. You look at the LA podcaster groups, and it's, they focus at pretty much exclusively around music. Am I correct on that, Rob? That's
the Los Angeles Podcast Festival?
Yeah.
I would say this past year it focused primarily around comedy podcasts.
Oh, comedy.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Rob, wouldn't you also say it's a fan event?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely. No, clearly it is.
Yeah, it's not an industry event, and VidCon is the same way. VidCon is, I call it Comic-Con for video. That's not an industry event. That's not where we go and talk about advancing our industry. That's where we go and meet our fans,
right?
Which is great. There's a purpose for that. But that's not what is going to help podcasters take their business to the next level.
I think. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Rick, I mean, I want to say that clearly the New Media Expo is the industry event, and I think that some of the things that we were talking about, I think, are not necessarily to put your event down or to make it's perceived as less important to the industry. I think I 100% agree. There needs to be a flagship event, and I think your event definitely fulfills that role in the industry, and I think it's critical that we have that. But to kind of dovetail onto the conversation of other types of events that are more specific to a genre, I think that there's a place for that, and I mean, it sounds like you would agree with that.
I do,
but it's
absolutely.
not those type of events are not a replacement for what you're trying to do, and what the New Media Expo is trying to do. And I think we're just trying to think outside of the box of how can we take this space and move it to the next level. I know that the Los Angeles Podcast Fest is an example of something that could be done across the country, and it is a little different show. It's a fan event. It's more localized, but you're right. It's not that kind of industry event, and it's very likely that this podcast movement event will not necessarily be an industry event, and it won't be a cross-pollination of other areas of new media that podcasters can learn from and all this kind of stuff. You're exactly right. That is one of the problems of being just focused exclusively on podcasting, is that you don't do a lot of cross-pollination. So
that was
go
another
ahead.
important point. And by the way, I think events like LA Podfest, it happens there for a couple of reasons, right? Because all those comedians are there. So logistically, It's easy.
Yep.
LA is also second biggest city in the country, so you got a big population who will come. So you're going to get fans. But again, as I said, it's not an industry event. I think LA Podfest would be great if it was actually a tour and it was in multiple cities across the country. Mm-hmm. I think that would be good for podcasting.
Yep.
But as you said, it's only one type of podcasting. It's really comedians, really mainstream comedians that you might see on TV who also happen to have podcasts. They're not like an independent podcaster, working on something that's much more niche. And those people are getting no exposure. It's funny, we interviewed for social media person on Thursday out in Las Vegas. And we we did a group interview and we had 5 people in the room. And we said, okay, who's the most famous social media person that you know of? We asked the group. Not one of them named anybody that you guys would consider a famous social media person. Somebody said Vince Neil. Somebody said Conan O'Brien. Somebody said, I don't remember, some TV star or something. I'm like, those aren't social media people. Those are mainstream celebrities who do social media. Yeah. And so while those people are important, and the fact that they use social media is good for all of us because it raises awareness in the general public, it doesn't let people know that there are shows like Rob has a podcast, or what you guys do, or the Taylor Swift podcast, which wins awards at the Podcast Awards every year. The industry is so much bigger, and that's one of our missions in life, is to let people in the industry know how much bigger it is than their own little world. And I know I explained that to Cliff too, and I would say I think Cliff is guilty of viewing that in a narrow sense and not seeing the bigger spectrum of podcasting. And he knows that that's been important to us and something that we've been working on for a long time. And we still have a long way to go.
And I think too, Rick, one of the things that is a challenge is that the podcasters themselves, there's a big difference between bloggers and podcasters. Bloggers, and this isn't a blanket statement, and it's actually gotten better. I was talking to you a little bit about consulting here before we started the show, but what we see largely is that most podcasters, they are not working at a level that is going to. They're not going to events. Many of them don't spend a lot of money on their trade. And I don't know why that is, where you see bloggers, they're really focused on improving their trade. They're at the events. They have lots of of course, there's a lot more bloggers than there's podcasters. Maybe, if you looked at the huge pile and our pile, and maybe it's all the same type of numbers, and maybe they just pull more. But, I just, I see a reluctancy for people to attend events and so forth. And I don't know what that really is. It's like East Coast guys won't come to the West Coast, and West Coast won't go to the East Coast. And, bloggers, if there's a conference, they come, and.
So there's a couple of different things there. And one of the things you said was, there are fewer podcasters than there are bloggers. That's true, which makes it even more important for those podcasters to, at some point, all get together in one place at one time. Because you think about what are our goals? What do we all need to do with new media? Number one, we need to raise awareness for all of us, so the mainstream public knows who we are, knows that we're there. I still tell people every day, I'm sure you guys do too, you explain what a podcast is. You explain what a blog is. You explain that you can go on the internet and find information on any subject in the world. You can listen to it, you can watch it on video, or you can read it in text. I'm stunned by how many people I know that don't know that. They don't know that. And so how do you break through that barrier to make people aware? You get everybody, as many people as possible in your tribe in one place at one time, because that makes news. And once you make that news, you raise awareness every single time you do that. Now, when we all get together, we should be learning how to be better. You should have gear to make your quality better. And people need to support those people. The funny thing, you look at, and you guys were talking about the Podcast Expo, which eventually became New Media Expo, which we bought from Tim and Emil. There is a very real chance there would have been no Podcast Expo.
True.
If we didn't buy it, because Tim was done. He wasn't going to do it again. And again, Todd, this goes back to you running the podcast awards. You take all kinds of flack about how you do it wrong, but nobody else is doing it. And somebody's got to carry that flag. And I am 100% committed to carrying that flag. We haven't even scratched the surface of where our industry is going to go. That's why we wanted Rob's employer on the stage at our show to say, hey, you guys, the guy who basically invented syndicated radio is now in the podcasting space. That is a big, big deal. And we want everybody to know it. And it was funny, some of the tweets that we see, it just drives me crazy. Some of the tweets that we see from independent podcasters saying, oh, well, who's this guy? And he only deals with, big time celebrity people, and that, what's that have to do with me?
Yeah.
The fact that's such short-term thinking. The fact that Norm is in the space is good for every single one of us. And he shouldn't be going to, and this, Rob, I talked to Norm about it. He's not going to NAB. He told me those guys are dinosaurs. They're living in the past. We're going to NAB to prove firsthand what podcasters and web TV people are doing and get their attention. Because, again, going back to Podcast Expo, Todd, and Rob, you were there too. I think other than Todd's company and Libsyn, every single company that was at that first Podcast Expo was out of business.
Yeah,
Am I wrong?
I think they're pretty much all gone. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The podcast-centric companies, for sure.
Yep.
And
every single one of them.
And actually, the first year we didn't actually exhibit at at that event because we were just brand new.
I know the name kept changing. It's hard to know which one, but
Yeah,
it was Podcast Expo the first year.
Yeah, we handed pens out the first year. That was
You were suitcasing.
yeah, and actually we were.
And then you look. I mean, Rob, I don't want to belabor it too much, but you were at Microsoft for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
They never gave one dime to the podcast event. Apple was at the Podcast Awards the last 2 years. They've never given one dime,
Not a dime,
to the Podcast Awards or the podcast event.
And some people that promised to get money didn't get any money.
Yeah, I think we need to back up a little bit. I mean, Zune was one of the very first sponsors of Blog World, and we also did some sponsorship of the
You're right.
some exhibitions of the New Media Expo for a few years.
I apologize for that, Rob.
Yep.
Zune was there one year, and you've been there every year.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. Going back to the very first Podcast Expo, same with Todd. So.
Yep.
And Rob, it's an interesting dynamic because, when you first hired Cliff, I had a long discussion with Cliff. And I've said this several times. I told Cliff, I said, when you are working on your speaker list, and I said everyone's going to have an agenda. And even though they're not going to be there pitching their wares, they're pitching to a certain extent by being a speaker. There's something that's going to come out. And I said I have an agenda. So don't this conversation. Just take it for what it's worth. And I had told him to be very careful in making his picks on speakers because you can alienate the audience. I mean, immediately if you have this. If you have if it's all Cliff's friends, that might be an issue, So I think he did a pretty good job of spreading that around, and making sure he had a good dynamic of people that showed up. And I know that when I was peeking in rooms and seeing how many people were in rooms, the rooms had decent audiences in them, and they kind of what I would have expected. But I tell you, one thing I really miss, and it's something that we used to see a lot more, was a lot of new faces. Now, I don't know if you've got, I'm sure you track it in your system on how many people have come years before and how many people were actually new. Do you have do you know what that breakdown is? And can you break it down specifically about the podcast group itself? Or
Yeah, and I think it's really important to say, I think Cliff did an amazing job the last couple of years.
I agree.
I mean, he was integral in us breaking through with the podcast community in a really, really big way.
Right.
I mean, he was the perfect guy for this job. And if Cliff didn't what he's trying to do is simplify his life and just not be overworked all the time. And I totally appreciate that. When he told me, that he wanted to resign, he said, "Please don't try to talk me into staying." I said, "No problem, Cliff. I totally get it. I've been working those long hours since 2006. I would never try to force you to do that because I understand you've got to do that for your own health and for your own family and all of those sorts." So there's no hard feelings with Cliff and I. He did an amazing job for us, and I told him this when I answered him, that I'll forever be grateful to everything he did for the show and all of his support. So it wasn't. He did say something again on your show that again upset me when he said he felt like the Lone Ranger, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've been doing this since 2006 and have spent literally millions of dollars supporting the podcast industry. So, I mean, even though for whatever reason we haven't always connected with the podcast community, we have absolutely been there and supported it and put our money where our mouth is. The Podcast Awards cost us about $20,000 this year.
Yeah.
Not one company paid to sponsor it at the show.
Right.
So that came out of my pocket. And, I think it was the biggest and best we ever had. And next year, it'll be bigger and better again. And the industry needs that.
Mm-hmm.
But one other thing you said about bloggers and podcasters being different, and people who do video are different too. I could be wrong, but I still think they all belong in the same place at the same time. At NAB, you see video and radio, they're married together. In the old media world, I think books, newspapers, magazines, those are different enough to be in a different place. In the new media world, I think blogging belongs in that mix with audio and video because we're all distributing on the same channel. We're all distributed on the web. And you, Todd, you sell a service to help people integrate their podcast with WordPress.
Right.
And so you as a podcaster can learn how to make your business better from a blogger.
No, I
a
think,
blogger,
I think
and vice versa.
I think your mix is good. I think the change you made 2 years ago was, I think you're tracking. I think it's, I think the mix is good. Bringing the bloggers, the podcasters, the web TV and video folks together. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it really, really does. And I think that the response from the podcasting community as a whole was quite positive. I don't think I heard any complaints. At least I don't. Rob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't heard any complaints of podcasting being second fiddle at New Media Expo. I think that was quelched with your rebranding. I think that people felt that the podcasting and bloggers were on an equal footing. I don't know, Rob, how did you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that is accurate. I definitely have felt over the last few years. I mean, it's been multiple years that there's been more of a equal footing for podcasting at the event, and I think each year that goes by, I agree, Rick. It's gotten better and better and better, and I think a big question for you, I guess, going forward is that since Cliff has left and Cliff was able to get some momentum going there, I guess. What is the thoughts around a replacement for Cliff, or what's the thinking going forward, into the future? Where do you see the event going, and how does podcasting right along with that, with Cliff being out of the picture now?
So to follow my habit of answering the last question first.
Yeah, that's fine.
Todd, we had more new people this year than we had the year before. So first timers. It's a pretty high percentage. We do meetup, something we started a couple of years ago. We have a meeting room where we do that. The room was full. It was like 300 people, and that wasn't everybody that was new. To go back to Rob's question, the next director of podcasting is a critical person for New Media Expo. I think there are a couple of reasons why you've seen podcasting take a bigger presence at the show. Number one, Cliff did a great job. But number two is podcasting has evolved a little bit. That's why we called the show Blog World and New Media Expo at the very beginning. Because go back to 2006, blogging is the thing that was in the news every day. Podcasting wasn't. It's funny enough that Podcast Expo actually started a year before us, but it wasn't in the mainstream consciousness the same way, and the technology and the ability to monetize it was just a couple years behind where blogging is. And same thing for video. Again, it's crazy to think back because it's not that long ago. In 2006, it was hard to watch video on the internet still. You had to wait for it to download, and it could be a lot jerkier. And, we still have that a little bit, but the difference between today and back then is night and day. And so I think video and podcasting will actually be the two biggest parts of the show, and blogging will become a smaller and smaller part as we go into the future. So to answer your question, Rob, it's super important. It's a major focus for us. And we haven't found that person yet. And also to answer your question about where's the future, I've said it.
Oh, you got cut off, Rick. I think he was about ready to tell us something critical.
Are you guys hearing me now?
Now we're hearing you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
to my point of video being jerky on the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not there yet. We're still evolving. But you'd asked about, where are we going in the future? I know I've shared with both of you guys privately, and I'll say it publicly because we've been talking to these guys since January. I think New Media Expo should be side by side with National Association of Broadcasters. I think that is the future for us. I'd love for it to happen in 2015. We're talking to them to have it happen in 2015. They're an association. It's taken this long to even get them to have the discussion. So it may or may not happen. But if I get my way, it will. We'll be in April 2015 alongside NAB. If it doesn't happen, we definitely won't be in January. The only reason we went to January was not because of CES, it was because of the Web TV Awards, and the Web TV Awards had the relationship with CES. And I think January has hurt us attendance-wise this year in particular because they had this crazy winter weather and a lot of people just physically couldn't get there. But
yeah.
I think January is a horrible time of year for us to have the show. And I think if you see New Media Expo side by side with NAB, and first of all, for podcasters, again, Todd and Rob, you've both been to the show. I mean, it'll be a complete geek fest for people going the first time to see the gear. And it's interesting that there is this fight right now. Back in 2007, I sat on a panel with Chris Brown from NAB. He's the vice president in charge of the show. And a woman named Tara Dunyan from CES. She's the director of PR for CES.
I know Tara well.
Yep. So I was on a panel of trade show people. And I was in the middle of Tara and Chris. And I said on that panel, I said, it's funny that I'm sitting between you guys because I think our community fits between your two shows. Those two shows are actually fighting for our community right now. And CES, because it's a sexier show, more people go to it. Your podcast, Todd, you guys belong there because you talk about technology.
Yeah.
But most podcasters don't belong at CES.
No.
Or web TV people. Mm-hmm. But, and again, Rob, I think with, working at Podcast One, you can relate to this too. People are consuming our content on all the devices that are at CES, on the laptops, on the tablets, and so they're gravitating to that event, and CES sees that. Both officially, like they sponsored the Web TV Awards, and unofficially, there are all sorts of content-related things happening at CES right now, with Hollywood studios going and holding events at CES, and they're not happening at NAB.
Right.
And that's where they belong. But NAB has been focused on the gear and the production side of it for so long, because in traditional media, those are two separate things, right? The content and the production. In new media, it's a lot of times it's the same person making those decisions. So NAB realizes that. I think we've come to the point where, like I said, those two communities are fighting over our community, which is a great place for new media to be. That both of those entities, those stakeholders realize how important we are now. I say they realize, they kind of realize, because although CES sponsored the Web TV Awards, not one single person from the CES show actually showed up to the Web TV Awards. They just wrote a check. And well, NAB says they really want us there. They haven't proved it yet at NAB. They say they want us there, but they're not quite sure why or to what extent. But we're getting closer.
Having gone to NAB probably for the last, and this will be the first year I'm actually going to miss in probably 5 or 6 years. When I first started going to NAB, it was all about, big business. And every booth I went into and I saw a piece of software or I saw some gear, the price made me stagger. And people that, this show's being done on a TriCaster, and, I begged those guys to, create a box that would be in the price range that we could sell to content creators. And they've got a basic entry box now it's on the edge of what people are doing live video can afford. But, basically over those 5 or 6 years, I started to see a little bit of infiltration with them with stuff that was designed for me. And there are a lot more independent people walking around, and they have to see that in their attendance data, that there's a lot more independent people there going to find stuff. But I think the majority of people walk away from that show thinking, okay, for example, if I wanted to do something in this video right now where I ran like an ESPN roll-in where they had all the graphics that would come in and roll and do what it does, besides producing a video and rolling that as an actual video instead of a graphic overlay, that's $10,000 and a piece of software to do that. But 5 years ago it was $100,000. So in a couple of years, that software is going to be $1,000. And we're actually real close to that now, and some stuff that's starting to come out. So it's, this show's been about big wallets, and you're still going to see it if you go to the show. But I walked into booths and said, "That's perfect. I need exactly that." It was a deal where you would have Twitter running on the bottom, and I could have the Twitter stream running on. And the guy wanted $500 a month. I told the guy, "You're smoking crack." I said, let me buy the software. I'll pay, $1,000 for the software package, but don't charge me $500. So their revenue model was all based upon TV and a recurring model that they could, and I understand that, but the space is changing and people are, getting frustrated and they're building tools. I think NAB is still, in my opinion, a couple of years. The vendors got to be seeing it, because I walk in the booth and I say, this is what I'm looking for. And I'm like, I'm just like out of my price range, and I leave. Now, before they used to smirk at me, now they don't necessarily smirk. I think they frown, and in their brain, they're running the cogs to, say, okay, how am I going to get this guy as a customer? But I think the podcasters would love to go to see the gear, and there's a lot of stuff that's there that's affordable. They go into the Shure booth, or they go into, the Beats booth, or wherever they're gonna find gear that they can use and apply to their trade, for sure. They're actually probably going to go out with a shopping list more than that'll wow them. And I think what it'll be good too is if there is a tie-in, if you can make that happen. It'll make people realize that you got to take your game to the next level. And that's why I spent so much money on this studio. I understood the value in having a good high quality video and audio production.
Well, that, and also, Todd, I think, and this is the perception that I've had, is that you've done this so you could learn how to put all these pieces together, and it's an important part of your overall business to understand that and go to CES. I mean, I think you learn a lot by going to CES and covering an event like that, and understanding about how to do this on a relatively shoestring budget, right? And that's the opportunity, I think. For new media creators and even the broadcasters out there today that can learn a lot about, a lot of the gear hacking that you've done over the years to cut costs and to increase quality and, go both those directions. And I wanted to also mention about the combination of the National Associated Broadcasters event and the New Media Expo, and that I think that there's a possibility that that the New Media Expo could be the one that benefits more from a pairing like that over the long run, because I think that there's a lot of learnings that have gone on in the new media space that the broadcasters need to learn, and there are some things from the big broadcaster side of the fence that the new media folks can learn too. So I think that there is this natural cross-pollination that can happen between those two events. But I think in the long run, I think it's going to be the New Media Expo that kind of wins in that. though I don't, I know Rick, and you can probably talk to this too. Do you see more? I mean, if you go down and align your show with the National Association of Broadcasters, do you see an opportunity to siphon off some of those kind of vendor exhibitors over to your event, or what's your kind
Yeah,
of bigger
it's good.
strategy for that?
It's a good question, Rob. So first of all, your point about New Media Expo winning more than NAB might win, I think you're right. I think the community of new media content creators absolutely wins by being aligned with NAB. And goes back to what Todd said about raising your game. There's if you read any kind of self-help book, or if you've ever tried to lose weight, which I've done many times in my life, or you want to just have better habits in your life, everybody will always tell you to hang out with the people you want to be like, not the people that you don't want to be like. And NAB is that for us. If you go and you see this gear that costs, hundreds of thousands of dollars, like you said, Todd, and there's software that you can't afford, you're like, man, I want that. I can't afford it. But it kind of opens your eyes to think how small we are still compared to where they are.
Oh.
Not to say that we're bad, just that we have so much room to grow, how much bigger we could be. And that opens people's eyes. Again, it's the same thing with Norm being in our business, where people say, oh, well, his business is different than my business, or whatever he says doesn't relate to me. I tell people, you are an idiot. You should be listening to every word Norm Pattis has to say, whether he's right or wrong, because what he thinks gives you insight into how people in that business think. And maybe the man who's made that much money might be somebody you could learn something from. And at NAB, you're surrounded by companies like that and businesses like that. There's such a learning opportunity. And again, I think so many people that goes to what was getting me upset about the show you guys did last week. I'm thinking, we're thinking too small. We got to think so much bigger. And people complain, we have this with T-Bex, that T-Bex is too big with 2,000 people. I'm like, what? You go to the travel industry event, it's 200,000 people, guys. Our community will not win being a community of 3,000 people. When we're 50,000 people, then we win. When we're 100,000 people, then we win. And if you want our community to stay 2,000, 3,000 people, what you're really saying is, I don't want anybody else to compete with me. I want to keep a little club, not I want to be as successful as possible, and I really want to change the world with new media. Todd, you mentioned New Tech. There's 5 or 6 guys that compete with them now that make smaller, cheaper boxes.
Yep. And there's going to be some major announcements at NAB.
That's right. Because those guys don't know to come to NMX. And your question too, your other point about would we siphon gear people from them? No, we're going to actually lose those gear people. People that we, like Shure is exhibited on and off at New Media Expo. If we're with NAB, then they'll never exhibit at New Media Expo again, because they're already there at NAB and you can go see them there. Yeah. But that's fine. There are people, Todd, at NAB who could buy your stuff. Yeah. Right? Now, out of the 85,000 people there, let's say 1% would be interested in whatever is over at New Media Expo. That's triple the size of what we are now. If we got 10,000 people coming over to the New Media Expo to say, oh, I need to get podcast hosting. Oh, I need these video services. Oh, I need to use a company like Radian 6 for social media monitoring, or Hootsuite or Sprout or something like that. That's a gigantic leap forward for our business. And we'll bring thousands more people to them, like you guys, asking them the same questions and telling them they're on crack, asking $500 a month for, thing to run Twitter across the bottom of the screen. The more people like us that they see, the harder they're going to work to make the gear smaller and those prices lower. Yep. I should be making it.
One thing that was kind of interesting was that, and this is completely a little bit off topic, but when I was at CES and we had our studio there, and I know you came by and saw it, Rick, I had a guy that walked by the studio one day and he said, I want to buy it all. Just sell it to me. And he was serious, and I actually spent a couple hours one evening giving this guy a quote. Now, I gave him a quote for replacement value. I knew I had, if I was going to sell him that stuff, I had to come back to Hawaii and reorder immediately through B&H and whoever else to so he
set it all up again.
Right. So he wasn't getting it cheap. It was, I gave him full retail essentially, and he this is full retail. I'm like, yeah, this is my stuff. I need this next week. So yeah, if you want it, you're paying full retail. Then I said, but if you don't, I said, call me the following week and I will spec it out for you and, charge you a consulting fee. And so that's what happened. I came back, and a week later, the guy emails me and said, I want all that stuff. And I said, okay, here's exactly what you're going to get. Here's the list. Here's how much it's going to. Well, I said, first of all, here's the consulting fee. Let's get that paid up front. He paid me the consulting fee up front. Then I said, okay, here's what you need. Do you want me to order it for you? Give me your credit card, and that's what I did. And this guy had, $65,000 worth of stuff drop shipped to him a week after the show. And I provided him, as part of my consulting fee, the wiring diagrams and some assistance in getting up and started. And that has resulted in me in selling 2 more of those packages. I already done the work, so now the guy just, they come to me and it works out very, very well. But you never know what's going to develop from that was personal, but you never know what that's going to develop on a regular business.
Yeah.
Just by going to a show or being at a show, and with
that many people, the chance of finding somebody that you can do business with just goes up because there's more of them there.
Yeah.
You know what I dream about is the talk that Leo and Norm and Noah gave at the show this year, is giving that sort of talk at NAB with our crowd there.
Yeah.
And half the room would be cheering and half the room would be booing. It would be awesome.
Yep.
And it would open eyes on both sides of the aisle.
Well,
which would be good for everybody.
I think the podcasting community, in the early days, we said, we're going to kill radio and broadcast. And we kind of, now we think back about that a little bit. It's kind of fun to laugh at that. But at the same point, you go to NAB and you understand why they are a multi-billion-dollar industry, not a multi-million-dollar industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry. And it's true. We're gnats on the wall compared to them from the type of money that they move in and out of their business. I've always laughed that if Ford or Chevy or some big national advertiser took 10% of their budget that they spend on television and put that in the podcasting space, they could buy everything. They could buy the entire. Every podcaster in existence could have 100% advertising in their show. If Ford would just spend 10% of the budget they spend on broadcast in the podcasting world, and you think about that, that's one company could own it. That's kind of scary, and that tells you really how small the space really is at this point. Rob, would you agree on that?
Yeah, I think, that's actually one of the big driving focuses of Podcast One is to tap into those big budgets, that are out there that are on the radio side. Yeah. I mean, even just focusing on the radio buys.
Yeah, the radio buys.
Is a multi-billion-dollar, spend by some of the biggest companies in this country. And so, trying to position this space to be appealing to those buyers and those brands is that's where the influx of money is going to come from, because it's not going to necessarily come solely from the digital side as rapidly. Sure, it's going to happen, but it's going to take time. It's much better to go to where the big budgets are, and I think that's where the opportunities are going forward. Rick, I wanted to also ask you, so as you look at the National Association of Broadcasters event kind of working with the New Media Expo, how do you see that logistically happening kind of in your vision? Do you see it as being, the New Media Expo is basically in the same hall as the other event, or do you see it being in a separate hotel, or what's kind of the depth of the potential of the relationship between those two events? Do you see, very tight kind of, you pay for one ticket and you can go to both events, or how do you see that kind of working?
Yeah, that's a good question, Rob. So, and that's where the rubber meets the road. So,
Yeah.
Part of the reason why we can have this discussion now is something you touched on earlier, Todd. The gear at NAB is getting smaller and cheaper.
Yep.
And the booths are getting smaller.
Yes, they are.
2 or 3 years ago, they would not have had space for us. Now they do. And any show, you don't ever want to have less space. You want to have more and more and more space. So on the exhibit side, they have some space for us now. And, we're not a big show, so they have room where we could fit our exhibits in the hall now. Where our challenge is on the meeting space side. So for the size trade show that NMX is, it's a gigantic conference. And again, just imagine, where we could have 2 or 3 standing room only rooms at New Media Expo at any given hour. And then you'd have other rooms, would be 3/4 full or half full or even a quarter full, depending on who's in the room. If you add those 85,000 plus people to that, and let's again say 10% of them buy conference tickets, every room would be standing room only. While not every one of our attendees, or not many of our attendees would want to go to the conference sessions at NAB, I think a significant portion of the NAB attendees would want to go to the conference sessions at New Media Expo. And that's the logistical challenge in having them in the same building at the same time, is having enough meeting rooms,
Right.
and then having them big enough to fit everybody in the room. So our people don't get pushed out because NAB people are filling up the room. So that's one of the challenges of doing it in the same room. Ideally, we'd like to be in the same building at the same time. That also means, by the way, that New Media Expo becomes 4 days instead of 2 days exhibits and 3 days conference. And Todd, that's more money as an exhibitor.
Right.
Even though you've paid to get there, it's 2 more days of feeding your people at
Yep.
hotels and all of that stuff. So it could go either way, Rob. We could be in a hotel at the same time, in a hotel a couple of days before, and we end and they start, or we could be in the same building. I just don't know yet. But ideally, we'd be in the same building at the same time.
One thing that's kind of interesting is when you go to NAB or CES and you stick your heads in the session rooms, they're virtually empty. The keynotes are well attended, but the sessions are, they're no bigger than your sessions are, maybe smaller, Rick.
Yep.
But where the difference is the mass of people are pretty much on the exhibit floor looking and talking with vendors. And it's, so from that standpoint, you probably have a better track system than they do, which is because I always look at their tracks and I'm like, I'm not interested. Not every once in a while, there might be something that I'm interested in NAB to go to from a track standpoint, but that's I don't think that's their main focus is the tracks. It's the floor is where it's at for them.
Right. It is a trade show where people are there to look at and buy gear and software,
Right.
And there's some education.
Some.
Where our event is the other way around.
Yeah.
It's education focused, and then there's some exhibits.
Right.
So I think our exhibitors, companies like you, Todd, would benefit greatly by us being at NAB, because you'd see the same people you see at our show.
Yep.
I think you'd see more of our people because we're, first of all, not in January, and second of all, with NAB. So there's added value for those people to come. Then, like I said, you think of the NAB people who could buy what you're selling.
Yep.
You're going to see exponentially more potential customers as an exhibitor. Like I said, the biggest challenge is the conference space, because I know their attendees will want to go to our conference sessions. And how do we get enough rooms, and how do we get big enough rooms? That's the big challenge.
And another thing too is from an exhibitor standpoint, because I've exhibited at NAB, I need like 5 people in the booth, because
right.
you're pretty much slammed. It's nonstop, which is a good thing too from a business perspective because of the the contacts you make. So I think it's a win-win I know you got a monumental task to make it happen, so I wish you luck on that. But I think it's a good fit, and I think and I think it'd be a big, I just encourage any podcaster just to go to NAB, get into Exhibit Pass, and just roam. Just hold on to your wallet. You're still going to be in for sticker shock when you see some stuff, but there is going to be a large amount of gear there that they can afford.
You want me to give a little plug since you just said
Sure.
podcasters should go? They could use our code EP Eric Paul 28 today. It's the last day actually, and they can get a free pass, exhibit hall pass at NAB. So, and obviously come by the New Media Lounge. And if anybody wants to come, we'll actually have just like we do at NMX, we'll have a couple of podcast stations where people can come and record their podcast at the show. And then we'll have a couple video stations as well where people can come and do video.
I know that Don Bain, my partner, he
Yep.
does a show here at Geek News Central. He's going to be doing a couple hours a day for you at the New Media Lounge. And then what a better show. This is the show that, I'm just kind of like, I was trying to convince my client. I'm actually going up to Seattle that week, trying to convince my client, can we shift a week? Can we? And he's like, no, I got to have you here this week. And I'm like, so I'm kind of torn. But, a consulting job comes before going to a trade show. So,
Yeah.
especially.
Well, so I know over the years, there's been podcasting sessions at the National Association of Broadcasters event. I mean, I've heard about it.
You,
and
yeah.
I think a couple of years I got invited and I couldn't go and that kind of stuff. So they have had some inkling of it for many years now. I think each year they have like one or two sessions, or they've had a session, a leader that leaded a couple of different panel sessions and things like that. So there has been some effort around that, but it's always been kind of fairly back burner, not very important. Generally the speakers are not really all that compelling. So, and always the feedback that I've gotten is that the broadcasters don't really care about podcasting and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how those attitudes are going to change here with you being a part of the show, and I guess having that web TV part and that blogging part, I think makes a lot of sense because I think a lot of those broadcasters need to learn some more about new media, and I think I can definitely see where the advantages are. It's not just focused just on podcasting either.
It goes back to my earlier point, Rob. And you're right. They've had token sessions for both web TV and podcasting for several years now.
Yeah.
And the web TV one, I can't even think of the podcasting one at the moment, but the web TV session's got Tom Green, comedian, Norm Macdonald, Callie Lewis, and somebody else I'm forgetting right now. So, a good mix of people and some celebrity type of attraction there, but it's one session, and it's kind of a novelty that way.
Yeah.
Where if you had 10 sessions going on concurrently, really deep new media stuff, that's going to make people say, what is going on there? And especially if there's an exhibit section where it'll be you'll know when you walk across the aisle from one side to the other, hey, wait, I'm in a different place now. And what is this all about? It's going to make those wheels turn. And then when we set those, few thousand people that come to our show loose on the show floor, and they, like I said, 10 more guys walk up to the same guy you talked to, Todd, and ask him the same question, he's going to start thinking, maybe I should do this now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that happened, and I'll just share a little story, is I've got a friend that listens to my show that he works at a major, and I won't say the company, but he works at a major video distribution company. I guess that's for a better word. They're an industry name, and he knew it comes to NAB, so I go over there and I always say hi to him. We talk a little bit and catch up. And a couple of years ago, he said, "Man, you got to see this new product we've got. This is perfect for the folks you work with." And he turns me over to a pitch guy that or some other team members that's going to show me about the product. Well, a quarter of the way into the demo, someone else comes up that's obviously either the previous client or someone that they work with, and he just basically like dissed me. He's like, "Oh, sorry, I need to talk with this guy. We're done." And I was pissed. I mean, I told it I used an expletive in his booth on him. Here I am interested in this product, and he dissed me. So I mean, I walked out there smoking steam mad, and so then I'm like,
you're usually so even tempered.
so then I'm like,
Yeah.
screw those guys. And my buddy calls me a couple weeks later, and he says, "Man, what did you think of that demo?" And I said, "Listen," I said, "I'm calm now, but let me tell you what happened." And this guy is a VP at that company, and he knew right then and there that they had blown it, that guy had burned a bridge. Now, I'll give him, it's one guy, one jerk. I'll give anyone a second chance. But, he went back this dude, says, do you realize that this guy has access to, X thousands of media creators, and this product was for them, and you blew him off just because you thought he was a nobody. So this is at NAB, I think if there's, like you said, Rick, if enough of us are there and saying, "Hey, I'm a content creator, I work in the podcasting space, or I'm a video blogger," or whatever whatever title they may want to carry, I do a show, not necessarily a podcaster, and enough people come in, boom, 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 looking to spend money, I think it will help. I mean, at the same time, I wish those companies would come to your show. I wish Shure and Mackie and all those, and they, come on, get a 10x10 booth, bring in some entry level, mid level stuff, and I think they would be shocked at the amount of sales that they would make coming out of that event. Now, it's not an NAB, but come on.
So you're right, Todd, and of course we wish they would come, but I see their point of view, and I said earlier that these bigger companies hadn't given bigger support, but again, go back to Microsoft. When you look at the amount of money, just like you said about companies who spend in advertising, the amount of money that they spend to come to our show is insignificant.
They probably spend 10 grand.
But it costs them money to make the boat move. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to activate all those people and to go do something there when they could be doing something at NAB or at some other event that just has a much, much broader reach. And we as a community, I mean, again, I'd love to say as a show organizer, I'm important, you need to come to my show and give us money. But I'm also realistic to know that maybe we need to go to them. And now we've made it cost efficient for them to cater to us and to our community. And
I think for the most part, podcasters, they're pretty loyal, and they
absolutely.
And they support people that support the space. And I don't know. So obviously we're not. If there was 100, like I said, if there was 100,000 of us at your show, and that's another thing too. It's
an easy decision for them.
Yeah, it goes back to why can't we get 100,000 people to Vegas for the event? That's a big question in my mark, is why aren't I'd like to see, obviously I want to see you guys grow much, much bigger, not only from a personal standpoint, from a business standpoint too. I just don't know how we get those folks to the show. I don't know, what was the biggest attendance number that Tim had in the early days? Do we know what their numbers were?
I think 2,200 people.
Yeah, I think it's always been around 2,000.
Around 2,000.
Yep. And it felt big in Ontario. Those first 2 years, the energy there was really, really high.
And I know that's part of the reason Gary wanted to do the podcast movement event, was he's looking to reconnect with that energy. And I don't know if that's possible.
But at the end of the day, being a big fish in a small pond is just not the same thing as being in a big pond. It's just different.
Right.
And for us to Again, I've heard so many podcasters say, "Oh, why can't we go back to that?"
I don't
When
think
we should
I
be
don't think we
going forward.
I don't think we
We
want
should,
to go back to that. I think we want, and Rob, I don't know, maybe you can help me out
to,
here. I think it's a
to bring back some of that, I think
yes,
is what we're
some
looking to
of
do.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't
Yeah.
know, and Rick, we've talked about that before. There was just, and maybe we were all just, it was the magic of the moment, and we were all in love 100% with the space, and maybe that was part of it too. It's okay, so when I was in the Navy. You hated the duty station you were at now, but when you left, you wish you could go back.
Yeah, exactly. It was always so wonderful back when, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And then you wish you could go back. And if you do go back, oh my God, why did I come back? I hate this place. It's the same, you always look backwards and you forget.
All of the warts that were back there, right? All you remember is the good parts. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Maybe it's,
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Todd, that I'm not sure that we can really ever get back to that. And I think parts of it is probably where the desire is, because the space has clearly changed. I mean, there's new players in the space. A lot of those companies that were back there, and a lot of those folks that were creating content back there aren't even creating podcasts anymore.
Right.
So it's a whole new crop of people that are in the space. I think it's a lot more legitimate space now. It's a lot more serious players in the space. So I think it's just evolved. It's changed, and it's gotten better, I think. But in some ways, we've kind of lost that community of new upstart people and those very early kind of very 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 influential people in the space. But in some ways, those new people are taking on a different mantle, and I do see some fragmentation in the community from the standpoint by genre, and I think that's what we were talking about. Because that fragmentation exists, that having some of these local events or themed events may be appropriate, because you just can't seem to get like all the comedians to come to the New Media Expo, but they'll all go to the LA podcast fest, right? So
yeah.
it's based on what people are willing to do and what their own communities are all about, and that's the opportunity and the challenge. I mean, to bring this industry together, and it just may not be able to be brought together in the way that I think that romantically we would like to think it might happen.
I
So
like that romantically.
I am stubbornly refuse to believe that it cannot happen. I believe that it will happen. It's hard work to make it happen, but
Yeah.
again, this kind of goes back to my feelings about hearing you guys talk last week. We have to change the mindset of the community, and
Yeah.
you're absolutely right, Rob, that those verticals and those smaller tribes do exist, absolutely, but those people have to understand that we are like them too, and they are also part of a bigger community.
Yeah.
And NAB is the example and
Yeah.
the direct analogy to what we are now. When you go to NAB, doesn't matter if you're a sports broadcaster or a religious broadcaster or in the news business or you're TMZ, you're a broadcaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And they view themselves as part of the broadcasting industry.
Yeah.
And until podcasters, which we're talking about today, but also web TV and bloggers view themselves as part of the new media industry.
Yep.
That's a challenge that we people do come to New Media Expo and they see it. They're like, oh, it opens their eyes, and they come back. And so
one of the things I've always shared in I call it my State of the Podcasting Union. That's my twist on one of the reports I make after we look at the Podcast Award nominees, is it's still, and I don't have the sheet in front of me, I'd have to dig in the archive, but there's still year to year a significant number of podcasters, and we should call them content creators or new media creators or whatever term we want to apply. Doesn't matter. They create content. That's the main thing. They do. The large majority of them don't blog, and it has always baffled me that they are willing to spend this energy to get themselves in someone's ear or on a screen one day or every other week, but yet they take no initiative to get that audience back on their website on a daily basis with, some sort of fresh content on there. And the bloggers fully understand why you have to have fresh content every day, why you have to be, that's got to be grinding and putting the content out. And so many content creators that I see just don't do that. And I think it's a large reason why their shows don't grow. But that's been my hypothesis, and not only hypothesis, but I also have proven data that shows that content creators that are blogging and have more content on their site are also growing from a audience size.
Do either one of you remember how many podcasters there were back in 2006 or 2007?
Oh, the number's never been. We've never been able to get a firm number.
Yeah.
45, 50,000,
yeah,
60,000.
It was a few thousand is all it was back. I mean, it depends on how far back you go,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, true.
Because that's one of the things that I was struck by, Rob, something that you said earlier when you went to that first podcast awards and you guys were talking about the magic at the show, is that, you had Father Roderick and you had the Muggles podcast. And
they're still going, but you don't hear from them.
But they were so different.
Yeah.
And everybody seemed to know who everybody was,
right.
even though they were in these completely different verticals, that the industry was small enough then where everybody knew everybody.
Yeah, and I'm getting surprised every day now, like, whoa, what's this? There's all kinds of stuff happening.
Well, and also we have to keep in mind, too, that back then there was a lot more hype around the space, too. It was really kind of there was articles flying out every day in the big trade magazines, and it was on the news, and Larry King was talking about podcasting on his show every night, and it was it was on the front page of the USA Today, and so it was a very heady time for the space, and it was really a lot of smoke and mirrors, honestly, back in those days compared to now, and it's real now, right? And so we went through this perception downswell back in the 2009, 2010 timeframe, and now we're charging back, and it's not unlike what I saw happen to the streaming media industry back in the early days, where they had that big hype cycle at the beginning, and then a fall off in companies. Companies went out of business, a lot of reorganizations, and a lot of changes, and then it's charge back again. And I that's exactly what's happening to podcasting. It's following almost the exact curve of what happened with the streaming media business.
I had a
I
it's
can
all
tell
up
you,
from
being
here.
a trade show guy, that this happens in every industry. So I was in the snowboard business many years ago in another life, and you saw that happen at what they called the Ski Industry Association show, SIA. And one year there were a couple of snowboards. The next year, there were hundreds of snowboard companies. They took over the show. And it was this whole different generation of people. There was some guys got busted smoking pot on a school bus on the show floor, And the ski industry guys are going, what's going on? These guys are crazy. And over the few years, it blew up, and then it contracted back down again. And pretty much most of the snowboard companies got bought by ski companies, or they went out of business. And now it's all part of the same show now, and it's part of the industry. That happens again and again and again.
I had to laugh. I had a call from a guy that wants to do some advertising, and he says, "Oh, podcasting's back in the rage." And I'm like, "Yeah, it sure is." I just smile and shake my head, and I just laugh. I'm like, "We haven't gone anywhere. We've been growing the whole time." But there was
I told you this offline, Todd. Internet marketers have found podcasting now, and it's a big thing to them, and now they're talking about how podcasting's the next big thing. I mean,
is it the entrepreneurs?
Or no, it's the social media space is really, I think, what that's all about, right, Rick?
Yeah, social media marketing is now podcasting.
Right.
So
And that brings its
again,
own interesting crowd.
it's another insular group of people,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and they're important, but they're just one group of
Right.
people.
Right.
And they're thinking now it's a whole new thing. It's like, no, this has been around forever, and the community is so much bigger than you guys.
Yeah.
So
And it's it is kind of funny though, because the calls recently have been curious, I guess, for a better word. And it's like I'm re-educating. It's good that the media buyers are calling. That's that's important. It's important that they're looking to spend money. So it's the guy's like, oh, I saw what GoDaddy's been doing the space, and I'm like, yeah, I brought them into the space, and the guy, oh, I saw what Citrix was doing, and I said, yeah, I brought them into the space, and the guy's like, you? I'm like, yeah, we did, and it's so there's it is kind of it's very, very an interesting time right now. It's good. I'm not complaining. I'm writing RFPs, and they turn into IOs, and that helps the bottom line. But also, I think too is that there's a expectation I'm seeing now from media buyers that is a negative thing too. Now they want to. Before they were more willing to let us drive the bus and build out, the show list, and they would really kind of let us roll with what we thought was best. And now they're being more, I guess, for better words, they're cherry picking, and that's actually a bad thing in my opinion, because they had a little bit narrow focused, a little bit on show size, and I hate to, like they told the one gal, she says, I want all your shows to have more than 10,000 listeners, and I'm like, okay, you're eliminating about 90% of the available inventory I have for you. And I said, the big shows are fantastic, I said, but you are completely discounting and actually throwing away a huge cross section of listeners that could be hearing your content, and they're not used to thinking. They're used to thinking about buying advertising in 4 or 5 properties. They're not thinking about buying 500 properties at once. They're still having a hard time grasping that around their brains.
I'm curious, Rob, a little bit off the subject now, but Todd went down this road. If you have any insight into, can you convince those media buyers that they do have to look at it a little bit differently and buy deeper than they would do in a traditional media buy, or is it just too hard to do?
Well, I think you're getting into an area with those buyers that they would be buying into shows that maybe they're not familiar with, or they don't understand the context of those audiences. And I think that's the education process too, is that buying across that many shows, I think to some advertisers is a risky thing, because you just don't know what the content is necessarily, what the quality of the program is, and it's just a risk parameter. I know Podcast One thinks about it more from a smaller number of shows with larger audiences. So that's how we think about the space and go after brand advertisers based on that model, and not necessarily buying into 500 shows. So I think that there's 2 ways to go about this, and I think certain advertisers are going to gravitate towards large buys like that, and other ones are going to tend to lean on fewer shows across a larger listener base. And I think Todd is correct. I mean, there are not a lot of shows that you can, there's not 500 shows that in a particular genre that you can buy that will reach the same scale as buying, 500 shows or 1,000 shows.
They can buy 10 or 20 in a specific category and get the numbers they're looking for, but the way I broke it down was, I said, okay, so here's what you're going to get with, I showed the spreadsheet. Here's what you're going to get with 10. Here's your uniques. This is the number of uniques, people you're going to reach with those 10 audiences. And it was, let's just use, I think the number was, maybe 220,000 or something like that. And then I took the full list of shows that I would have add them by, and it was like 22 million, because they all are these individual, they all have their, and so, and they look at that and they go, how's that possible? I'm like, because they're not all listening to those top shows. A lot of people are attracted to the smaller shows, and matter of fact, many times the bigger shows, what we're finding and what we have found is many times the bigger shows have lower engagement rates than the smaller shows. And that baffles their brains a little bit. Well, how can that be? Well, it's a more close, intimate audience, And
and it's also, those larger shows tend to be shows that are a little bit more generic in topics, so they could be less contextually relevant to the advertiser. So there's pluses and minuses as to going for larger audiences versus narrow niche audiences. So I mean, it's a if you're playing in kind of brand advertising versus direct response advertising, it's a little different game.
Right.
I mean, we're trying to go after both, but brand advertising is where a lot of big budgets are,
and
they're going after
and they're not spending no money. Very few brand, and that's what's kind of crazy to me. Is like I told the guy that was on the phone, I says, what's your goal, brand or sales? And he says, well, both. And this guy was pretty sharp. He says, and also I'm getting SEO value, because, you guys are talking about my product and you're linking to it from these sites. There's context behind it. And so, I was kind of thinking in the back of my mind, oh, here we go. They're actually, Google has been hammering all these companies for buying links and stuff like that. So I think what's going to end up happening, and this is maybe the dirty little secret that'll probably start to emerge, is I think companies are going to start buying podcasts in mass, largely because it helps them build. And I think the brand awareness folks are starting to understand that they're going to get SEO, not only just sales, but good SEO value out of advertising on podcasts, because there's context behind the link. So, we'll have to watch and see who's trying to buy. But it ends up we have some grubby advertiser that tries to come in. We'll have to, then we'll have to start being very selective on who we run. But it is kind of an interesting move, and makes me go just a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a huge upside for this whole podcasting space around brand advertising, and I've always felt that, even back from the days when I had my own radio show. I mean, talking with, particular advertisers, like a web.com was a very early advertiser on my show. I pitched them on the whole idea of advertising, and they're doing a lot of TV direct response advertising now. But was trying to convince them that there is value in a podcast to brand communication over the long term. The whole direct response thing it has value in the short term, but has limited value in the short term compared to the long-term relationship building that you do around brand advertising. I mean, Todd's a classic example of that with GoDaddy. Is the combination of direct response and brand advertising is powerful if you think about it in the long term.
And not only that, but long-term customer retainment too.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, I didn't want to turn this into an advertising show, but I think Rick that
almost always does.
Yeah. I think if you can attract the media buyers to the show, and I know you've tried to do that in the past. I know that's tough, but I think you had the one company in particular that was there. They were taking meetings. Rob and I both met with that company, and there was some business that was derived from those discussions as well. And I know they were there talking with podcasters too. So, I
agree with that. And it comes down to, again, being a little bit larger to reach that tipping point for them to say, oh, yep, I need to go to that. And again, I think that alignment with NAB, if we could pull that off, makes that a little bit closer to being possible. Because when you tell anybody, oh, there's 85,000 people here, that's different than there's 3,000 people here.
Yeah.
And it's just a different conversation. And so that's something that the people on the web TV side want to do as well. And I think for both podcasting and on the video side, it's something that we want to do. So.
Yeah, and it also probably helps you as an event organizer sell more sponsorships to your event to help better monetize your business too. So I think it's a good thing to try and grow the scale of this.
Absolutely. Yep.
And and Rick, we continue. Obviously, we'll continue to support the show the best we can, and I know that you got some decision points to make here in the near future on what's going to happen for the next year's show. I think that the thought process behind some of these third party events are good. But again, I agree with you that there has to be an industry wide event, and my team has all said too that we want to be there to wave the flag to say, hey, we're still here, we're still in business. Don't forget we're out there, and we're pretty active in making sure people know that as well through our other stuff that we're offering. But the space is changing, and we had some good discussions about that. I really can't go into too many details, but we did our winter retreat in Chicago, right in between.
You went to the snow?
Yeah, right in between snowstorms. Well, what we do is we go someplace where we know we're not going to go out and goof off. We went and locked ourselves in a nice hotel suite for 4 days or 3 days. And, we talking about where the space is headed and trends that we're seeing. So, we're going to come out with some new products this year, and it's largely it's because of the way the space is changing. And a lot of it was driven by support tickets that we're getting. We're getting support tickets XXX, and we're saying, they're having a problem here. It's not being caused by us. It's causing by someone else. So I'm getting tickets because of another issue with the third party. Let's replace the third party, and let's bring that product online and integrate it into our suite, and that's what we're going to do, because we just keep seeing that there's a lot of, how should we say it, partial solutions. And solutions that are not helping podcasters in the least in the long run. It's impacting them negatively. So I think from a company space, we see the space changing. Sadly, that's the rest of the world is not paying attention to this space in a large way. It's an afterthought.
Yeah, Todd, I tend to agree with that. I think that there's I think a good example, I believe, of what you're talking about is SoundCloud, right? Being kind of like half-hearted in the podcasting business.
They're causing a lot of pain. We're dealing with the after effects of that every day with people that are going over there and realizing, man, this was dumb. Why did I lock myself in over here?
I talked to folks saying the same thing. And some of those folks are moving over to our platform. So
it's bright and shiny, and then it looked cute, but then in the end, they're like, "Man, where'd my brand go?" My brand is And what happens if SoundCloud goes out of business? They're not, they're startup. So scary stuff. But that's decisions people make, and hopefully by going to shows like New Media Expo or to NMX Live, is that they're able to make a better first decision, and we can catch them before they make these mistakes. But some of these people are pretty smart. It's the thing that just drives me crazy is, why did you do that? And not just SoundCloud, but other things that they do in the space.
Well, it's the attraction of the free bandwidth and the viral sharing capability that SoundCloud has, which are good. I mean, there's a lot of podcasters that are tapping into that, but I just wouldn't use it as your primary distribution point. I would just use it as a secondary.
Right.
And I think more and more people are learning that.
Yeah. And it's the same thing too. Like Rick, you guys ought to reach out to the iHeartRadio folks, and have them.
They were there.
The challenge is they were there through a third party. The iHeart people have regulated their directly to the Spreaker folks, and that's got.
I mean, they were at New Media Expo this year. They had somebody in the audience,
Oh.
an executive, during Norm and Leo's talk. So I don't know if you guys remember, but people weren't saying nice things about iHeartRadio. But
No, that's true.
The guy told me afterwards that that they wanted to be at the show in 2015. So, and again, I think they should be there. They're important. We can talk about all the different ways they might be doing it wrong or not doing it our way.
But if they're there, we can tell them face to face, you're doing this wrong.
Yes. No.
Well, and one of the challenges too is that both of those companies, Spreaker and SoundCloud, are European-based companies, so their teams are not necessarily U.S.-based. So they have to come a long ways.
Well, we're in an hour and a half, so let's kind of get this thing wrapped. Rob, I have to mention what's the crow behind you?
It's actually my wife put it there. It's her crow. She's a big fan of blackbirds and crows. So we bought that up at Whistler last summer, and she just put it behind me. She thought it would be a fun little accent to my background, spark conversation, which I guess it just did.
My wife, my wife is just the opposite. She is freaked out about blackbirds and crows. They give her the hivey-jivies. So it's kind of fun. I saw it back there. I said, "Oh, my wife saw that, she'd freak out." So,
well, they're very, very
Todd,
smart birds. Yeah, they're
they are
very, very smart birds. And she actually, I used to work at a university, and she had a window right next to her desk, and this blackbird would come up and land on the ledge of her window, and she would feed it. She did this for years with this one blackbird, so she developed a relationship with him. So consequently, she's a big fan.
Hey, I do want to mention the chat room. Someone popped in the chat room and said, I tried to get a new advertiser to get onto my podcast. However, they were a little nervous because they've never done podcasts. It's just true. I think that some of the big companies don't get podcasts, and it's true. They don't. Some don't. So I think more and more are. I haven't had to explain what a podcast is in a while. So, and I think that's just a word now. I think we all need to realize that people get the content. We've said this many times now, just any way, any device, any app almost can get them access to the content. So it's just a term about the space. So, Rick, any final outgoing thoughts?
No, I enjoyed the conversation with you guys today. I don't have anything else to add. I like Rob's Blackbird as well. I thought maybe his nickname was the Crow or something.
Yeah, I had to bring it a little closer here so the audience could actually, I can see it in the monitor better than other folks do. But it's back there, along with your name tag too. Your Rob Greenlee name tag's back there, Rob.
And that name tag came from the New Media Expo, so I put it back there.
That's funny.
Oh, from the desk when you're speaking.
Yes, from the panel that Todd and I did. Yeah.
See, we should have had our logo on there.
There you go.
And I know I need to work on my background now.
So, Rob, any plans have we thought about next week?
No, I haven't really thought about that too much, and maybe it's just you and I can do a show again. I think we found that those were good shows too sometimes, where we just can sit around and talk about the space too. Yeah,
we've been looking at the numbers. We went through them last week, and the show's doing really well. And it was kind of odd. Rob and I said, "Well, which show's got the biggest numbers?" And I'm like, "Rob, it was the show where we had no guests, so it was kind of weird. I don't know what drives that, but anyway, guys, thanks so very much. If you, the audience, if you want to reach us, you can reach us at Rob or Todd at newmediashow.com. And we're still working it. There is changes coming to the site. We're going to be breaking each property out into its own landing page. I don't have a timeline yet, but it's something that it's probably going to be June before I get the stupid thing done. But I'm at the whims of my graphics developers at this point. But I think we've got the code done to make the transition. But it's going to be very exciting when we do. I think it's going to help the brand of this show. But For now, you can catch us every Saturday that Rob and I are within striking distance of a microphone at live.geeknewscentral.com or at newmediashow.com. But Rob and Rick, thanks, guys.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yep.
Have a good weekend.
Take care, and everyone else.
Thank you, guys.
We'll see you next time. And from here, from Honolulu, aloha.
Bye-bye.
All right. We're still on Ustream. I mean, on YouTube.